Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to this penultimate session of our commemorating D-Day 70th anniversary event, a session featuring three heroes, three combat veterans of the Second World War. My name is Peter Hahn. I am privileged to serve currently as the chair of the History Department here at Ohio State, and I'm deeply honored to share just a few brief remarks with you at the outset of this session. I'd like to begin first by introducing our moderator to the far right of where I'm standing. That's Greg Lashutka. Greg originally hailed from Cleveland. He has a long resume of professional accomplishment, including, and I'll be rapid fire here, an Eagle Scout in his youth, a member of the football team here at Ohio State in the early 60s under the legendary Coach Woody Hayes, and served as co-captain of the 1965 team. Greg earned a BA in history and eventually a law degree, a BA in history at Ohio State, and eventually a law degree across town at Capital University. He also had heroic service as a member of the U.S. Navy during the Vietnam War and in the Vietnam Theater. Back in Columbus, he practiced law and then twice was elected mayor of Columbus, first in 1991 and again in 1995. Under Greg's leadership, Columbus was named an All-American City, and Greg was Municipal Leader of the Year, winner of the Municipal Leader of the Year award in 1996, and he was named president of the National League of Cities in 1996. In just a few minutes, Greg is going to introduce our distinguished guests this afternoon. Before moving on to the veterans panel, though, I would like to take just a couple of minutes to address the topic of the Ohio State University contribution to World War II. It turns out that our alumni office here on campus back in the 1940s carefully tracked the service of OSU students and alumni, and those records reveal clearly the extent of the university commitment to the war effort. In October 1944, for instance, the alumni office reported in its monthly magazine that at that moment there were 12,292 Buckeyes in uniform. And by Buckeyes in uniform, they meant both students who had left their studies short of degree and alumni of the university who answered the call. 55% of those 12,292 were officers. The alumni office recorded, in fact, that that number signified 1/3 of all of the men who had ever attended the university, which tells you a couple of things. One is that Ohio State used to not quite be as big as it is today. It also tells you that the extent of the commitment was momentous. The alumni office went on to report that the Western Conference, what we now call the Big Ten, collectively supplied more than 100,000 men and women to the military effort, a number that represented 1% of all soldiers and sailors in the uniform of the United States. Of the more than 12,000 Buckeyes who answered the call, 635 of them made the ultimate sacrifice for our country. According to alumni office tabulations, these 635 so-called gold stars averaged 25 years, 3 months in age at the time of death. 186 of them died in accidents, mostly plane crashes. 30 died of disease or complications of surgery. 419 were taken, quote, by enemy action, unquote. A majority of 354 perished in the European theater. Fewer than half as many, 154, perished in the Pacific. The remainder died in the Western Hemisphere. Almost all of the 635 Gold Stars left behind parents and siblings. 191 of them left behind wives. 81 left behind children. 15 left behind children they had never cradled in their arms. Behind each one of these losses was a story of heroism and sacrifice. In light of this conference's focus on D-Day, allow me to concentrate your attention on 12 of the 635. The so-called Normandy 12, the dozen OSU students and alumni who were buried at the U.S. Military Cemetery on the bluff overlooking Omaha Beach. Allow me to call their names as they appear on the screen behind me. Army First Lieutenant John W. Atkinson, Jr., class of 1936. Army First Lieutenant Thomas R. Berry, class of 1940. Army Second Lieutenant Max D. Clark, class of 1941. Army Air Forces Captain Roger B. Dyer, class of 1942. Army First Lieutenant Robert E. Egbert, class of 1945. Army Air Forces Second Lieutenant Robert E. Forrest, class of 1943. Army Private First Class John O. Fry, Jr., class of 1944. Army Second Lieutenant Richard A. Kirsting, class of 1942. Army Captain John A. Culp, class of 44. Army Major Robert A. Lane, class of 1934. Army Air Forces Major Robert E. Smith, class of 1940. And Army First Lieutenant Melvin M. Spruill, PhD, class of 1939. Of these Buckeye 12, 11 were officers, 1 was enlisted. Their ages range from 19 to 31. The 12 heroes earned a total of 19 medals, including 11 Purple Hearts, 2 Distinguished Service Crosses, 3 Air Medals, 2 with oak leaf clusters, a Distinguished Flying Cross, a Bronze Star, and a Silver Star. 5 of the Buckeye 12 left behind wives. 4 of them left behind children, 6 children in all. We often wonder what the dead would say if they could speak to us today, and we crave information about the human side of their lives. In the case of one of the 12, we have some clues. Army Major Robert A. Lane, class of 1934, graduated from OSU with a degree in agriculture. At some point before Pearl Harbor, he joined the United States Army, and during the war, he served with bravery in North Africa, Sicily, and Italy in armored divisions before he was deployed to France for the invasion. In December 1942, Major Lane wrote a letter to his 1-year-old daughter, a letter that is now captured in time in one of the museums in Normandy, not far from where he fell. Major Lane wrote, "My dear Sandra, I know that a little girl who is not quite 2 years old can't read a letter, but perhaps you'll be old enough to read before I see you again. Your daddy was in the Army when you were born, and most of your life has been without having me with you. We were just getting to know each other when I had to go away, and I believe I could have taught you to say Daddy if I could have been with you a little longer. I have watched your brother and sister grow up from a baby too, and you were a very good baby whenever I got to see you. As you learn to talk and ask for things, I want you to pay close attention to what your mother says, for your mother knows what is best for you. I hope to get to see you again before so very long, and we really get acquainted. As ever, Daddy." Major Robert A. Lane, Ohio State University class of 1934, was killed by enemy action in France on August 23, 1944. Today, he is buried in Plot A, Row 4, Grave 41, in the U.S. Military Cemetery at Colleville-sur-Mer, France. In honor and in solemn memory of Major Lane and the other members of the Buckeye 12 at Normandy, please join in observing a moment of silence. Thank you.
Peter, thank you so much. And thank you and the Ohio State University, and particularly the History Department, for having the 70th commemoration of D-Day. And for this, we who are sitting in this room have the freedoms that come from a greatest generation, as Mr. Brokaw said. So It is my distinct honor to have been invited to join three men who represent the finest of that generation: Mr. Wendell Ellenwood, Mr. Donald Dunn, and Mr. Jim Baize. Before I do so, as I look around this room, I see others who also served in that time period. And if you would allow me, would those, if you could, who did serve with these three gentlemen in that time period in World War II, please stand and let us say thank you to you. Yes. We had three theaters in that war. Wendell served and was part of the Normandy invasion, and you'll hear in a moment more on his introduction. Donald Dunn was part of the Italian theater, and I have known both gentlemen for a long time, and it wasn't until the last several years that I heard from either of them anything sharing that they served or were in the situations that brought us the freedoms. Mr. Jim Baize and I just met today. He traveled from Indianapolis, and you'll hear an extraordinary story from him. So let me set the format. I will introduce all three. Then Mr. Wendell Ellenwood will speak. They have windows of time to share from their heart a perspective that we hope will let us appreciate what they've gone through. Donald Dunn will follow, and Mr. Jim Baize third. You will also have cards available to you as our friends speak and share perspectives. Please provide those back to those who are passing them out. We'll collect those. We'll try to put them in some sort of a priority, and then we'll have questions that they may respond to that come from you, rather than have people ask questions from the audience, if that's okay in your regard. And then we'll wrap up at 5 o'clock and have a reception outside that we all can join. So if that works for you, it works for me. The first speaker, but I'll introduce all three again, is Mr. Wendell Ellenwood. Among our three veterans, he is the one who survived D-Day. He's also one of Ohio State University's own. He's now the Director Emeritus of the Ohio Union, seeing several Ohio Unions in his career. This is the most recent vintage. In 1944, Wendell Ellenwood, an Ohio State undergraduate from Jackson County, Ohio, landed at Utah Beach and served in the front lines for the duration of the war, fighting the iconic battle in the Battle of the Bulge. For his service, he received the Purple Heart, the Bronze Star with the V for Valor, the Air Medal, the French Croix de Guerre, the French Liberation Medal, and after the war, Wendell couldn't resist and he returned to Ohio and the Ohio State University, serving as the director of the Ohio Union for 25 years. Mr. Donald Dunn, born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, trained with the 10th Mountain Division in Camp Hale, Colorado, and Texas, before deploying to Italy with Company G, 86th Mountain Infantry in December 1944. Staff Sergeant Donald Dunn was awarded the Combat Infantryman's Badge for his first major combat action in March 1945 in the village of Iola, and was wounded while leading his men in the infantry platoon during the final offense in Italy in April 1945. He received the Silver Star and the Purple Heart. Mr. Jim Baize, a native of Indianapolis, Indiana, enlisted in the U.S. Navy at age 15. I don't think he told the truth in that experience, but I'm not pushing him on that. He wound up serving in the intense Pacific Theater. All three of the theaters were intense. He was assigned to the USS Fremont, participating in battles on the Japanese-held islands of Saipan and Iwo Jima. His duties included ferrying troops, Marines primarily, and supplies safely from one ship to the beachhead. During the Battle of Iwo Jima, Mr. Baize was wounded more than once under substantial fire from the hills that conceal the Japanese positions. Ladies and gentlemen, we have three wonderful men to share their story, and let me ask Wendell Ellenwood to lead off, and your comments will be appreciated by all of us. Thank you, Wendell, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, Greg. Can everybody hear all right? All right. Well, Greg, as Mammy Yocum said once, mainly that was so, but I've got to correct one thing right off the bat. I was not there on D-Day itself. I was part of the new Third Army under General Patton that was formed, and it was mostly all armor. And so we were waiting in England, or in my case in Wales, for the formation of the Third Army, and opportunity to get where we could use our tanks. So I was not there on D-Day itself. I went in, a little bit later when we had increased our beachhead to about St. Lo. We were out of the hedgerow country by that time. Hedgerow's no good place for a tank. And we got down to about St. Lo, where the place opened up and we were able to use our tanks. And as we went in there, there were signs of war all around us. The lanes were full, either side, of burned out vehicles. And I've never seen cattle, horses, so bloated in my life. And I came from the farm, so I've seen them before. But it was a mess. Well, we began our first stopped for firing a position. Incidentally, I was in 155 millimeter howitzers, which were drawn by tractors, very similar to Caterpillar tractors. And I was one of the last to join the outfit. They had already been through maneuvers and already been alerted for overseas duty. So naturally, I was appointed to the esteemed position of artillery forward observer for A Battery. Another friend from Missouri who came at the same time was given the honor position of artillery forward observer for B Battery. And we were both aerial and ground observers. As it turned out, he did more aerial and I did more ground observation. And we might not have been right on the front line at the beginning, but we lost both of our airplanes. We had two these small L4 planes that you see that's run by a lawnmower engine, and we lost both of those within the first 2 weeks, and we lost both of our pilots too. So we had to kind of start from scratch. And originally we were doing mostly land observation, which meant either joining the infantry outfit that was making the push or the artillery outfit that was making the push. Whoever needed the extra help from 155 millimeter howitzers, we were assigned to them in artillery or in a cavalry and in the infantry. I usually went with the reconnaissance officer that they had and added additional support for them. In the tanks, I usually rode with the commander of Combat Command B, which at one time in the 4th Harvard was General Abrams, and whoever was out there making that push to get to where we were supposed to go. Our tour was from St. Lo, pretty much directly across east in France, with the Loire River as our boundary. That was our southernmost point. And we kept to the north of the Loire River, going through Tours and other places that many of us knew about or heard about. I happened to be assigned to the French 2nd Armored Division as we were approaching France, and I remember our group were pulled off to the side of the road while the 2nd Armored itself went through to liberate Paris. And then we resumed our march south of Paris on east, and the fighting was becoming pretty hard at this time. Along about Nancy and Metz, we began to run low on fuel because we were using a lot of fuel, as you could imagine, and our lines were getting longer. And we still had not gotten the Cherbourg Peninsula harbor completely renovated yet. And the Mulberry Wharf, as many of you know, was demolished, pretty much so. So we ran out of fuel. And in November, we pretty much just diddled around in between Nancy and Metz without ammunition or fuel to take us any farther. When we did get some fuel, we started out again and went through the Siegfried Line for the first time. I think we went through it 4 times. Each time got harder because each time they began to get more men in there. And we had more firepower opposing us. We had just gotten beyond Nancy and Metz and into the Saar Valley, the point where Germany or France becomes Germany. And I remember a forward observer in the 3rd floor of one house on the other side of the Baize River. And we had to cross about 50 yards of open land to get to this. And it was the only house where we had any American soldiers. The rest of the houses in that town were occupied by Germans, and the bottom part of our house was full of German prisoners. Oh, we didn't know whether they were prisoners or we were prisoners, but they were there. And we got word by radio. I don't know that I mentioned each of us carried it. We had a radio and an operator and a telephone operator. The 3 of us made up our forward observer team. And we got the word to get back to the outfit right away. Well, on the way back, across that 50 yards of open land, I almost made it. My 2 aides wore Red Cross armbands and carried me on a sling. And we almost got there, but not quite. And but we did get in our boat and got back to the outfit, which was already fixed up, ready to go north. We didn't know where. But that night, we went back across the light line into France. First time we'd had our lights on since we landed. And then directly north, and I had a map that said I was supposed to be in a firing position at around St. Vith when it came dawn. And, well, we were there. That was the coldest night I ever spent. It was, they said later on, the coldest night in 50 years. And we didn't know, we were supposed to be ready to fire in 360 degrees because we didn't know where anybody was. And we made it, we were there. And then we set about a month of just plain, where are they, where are we going? And each day was different from the next. And my time's about up.
No, you've got all you want.
Oh. So that was